my friend Stanley Tate is one of the most accomplished people in America, and you're going to have to go like Google him to find out the truth, because he's not going to tell you. So I'll give you a couple of things. Florida has the biggest college savings program, 529 or whatever they call it, in all of America, the most successful, the most enrolled, and Stanley wrote it many, many years ago. And if we didn't, you know what I mean? And if we didn't do everything with people who run for office, it would be called the Tate Plan. But he was never governor, so we don't get to call it the Tate Plan. But God bless you for that. And he's got all this other stuff that I'm not going to tell you. He was mayor of one of the small towns down here in Miami, well, back when it was a small town. And he's older than most of us. And he's still doing all of it. And I won't say more than that. I don't want to blow his cover. Next thing you know, he'll be wiretapped. But yeah, you know, you got to be careful of that. But I am introducing Stanley. Stanley, come on up and give us an opportunity to honor you.
What can I say except thank you? It's always a pleasure for me to be here among all of my friends. The trip up was a little long, and I got here a little bit late, but I don't think we missed anything. There isn't anyone in this room who I don't know one way or another. But there are certain people here that deserve separate types of recognition, and one of them is the president of PJTN. That's an organization made up of over 41,000 people, one of the largest in the United States. It's a Gentile organization, but their biggest theme in life is to support Israel. And they do an outstanding job. The president of that organization, Laurie Cardoza-Moore, is with us tonight, and I want to introduce you to her so that she can say a few words. Laurie Cardoza-Moore.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the warm welcome. Margie, thank you so much for inviting me, Sid. It's a great honor to be here again. Thank you. Congressman DeSantis, what an honor to see you again, sir. We're going to talk about you in a minute. And I want to thank all of our friends who came tonight. What a great honor to be here to share this evening with you. The mission, as Stanley said, of our organization, and he did mention he is the chairman of this organization. And Stanley, his involvement with education even transcends into our mission. The mission of proclaiming justice to the nations is to educate Christians about our biblical responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren and defend the state of Israel against the rise of global anti-Semitism. I am honored to also tell you that 56 years ago, I was born in Broward County at Broward General. I graduated from Broward High School, South Plantation. And of course, we want to remember the family, the victims who lost loved ones in that horrible massacre. Our children are vulnerable, ladies and gentlemen. We have got to start protecting them on our campuses. It must be priority. But there's another area that we must protect our children as well, and that's through their education. We accomplish our mission by producing award-winning documentary films and television programs, and then we broadcast these programs to a Christian audience around the globe, reaching 2.6, just this year, we hit 2.6 billion viewers globally with our message to stand against anti-Semitism. We've been recently, I'm sure many of you have been following what's going on in Poland. They're changing the laws, revisionist history. They're doing it in other countries, Latvia, Ukraine, Turkey. I also had the honor of serving at the United Nations as a special envoy for the World Council of Independent Christian Churches. And let me tell you, that's an ordeal. But you see revisionist history there. But ladies and gentlemen, the revisionist history is very dangerous because now it's trickling down into our schools. It's trickling down through our curriculum and our textbooks. We found a textbook in Williamson County. Those of you who've been following this issue, it went nationwide, but we found a textbook that legitimized, by Pearson Publishers, that legitimized Palestinians blowing themselves up in a Jerusalem restaurant because they were waging a war against Israeli government policies and army actions. And the school refused to remove the textbook. Well, let me tell you, after Fox News got a hold of the story and ran it for 2 weeks, we started hearing from parents all over the country. And guess which state we heard the most from? Florida. We are now, I was invited yesterday to travel to Sebring to meet with 13 organizational leaders. We are going to launch a campaign statewide. We're going to start with 20 counties, and we're going to expose the content that our children are being indoctrinated with. But it doesn't stop there, because I went to Washington, D.C. back in September to have a conversation with the Congressman, to share with him the content of what we found in the textbooks. He came out of his committee. He gave me a specific time to meet him. He came out of the committee room, sat with me for 15 minutes while I shared with him what was going on. This man offered to help me, assist me any way that he can. So, Congressman, I'm going to be pulling that card one of these days. And God willing, who knows, you might be the governor of the state of Florida. Of course, I can't endorse anybody, but I'm just saying. Again, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to be here with you. I hope that you will stop by our table at the end of the program, that you'll learn more about PJTN, our mission, get involved, because all the work that we're doing in trying to secure our freedoms as a constitutional republic, a word that the kids don't hear very often in school anymore. But we can't do it without each of you. We must mobilize to action to defend and make sure that the content being given to our children to educate them in our public schools, like the content I received in Broward County schools, because that's why I'm here. The content should be historically accurate, it should be unbiased, and it should reflect the values of our community. God bless you all. It's an honor to be here tonight. Margie, thank you so much.
Laurie's another one who obviously doesn't sleep because the emails I get are like middle of the night, middle of the afternoon. It's what it takes for the world to become a better place, is people who are committed and who don't sleep. So now we're getting real close, and I get to introduce the person who's going to introduce the person you all want to hear. So he gets to do the whole thing. Everybody, let's hear it. Bill Diamond, sponsored tonight, and an accomplished Republican who literally goes all the way back to Rudy Giuliani and 9/11.
Thank you, Sid. Thank you, Margie. Thank you, Laurie. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please raise your hands if you regularly watch Fox News. Well, that's pretty good. And raise your hands again if you see Ron DeSantis on Fox News. Yeah, just checking your ratings. So Ron, 39 years ago, our guest of honor was born in Jacksonville, Florida, and was raised in a place called Dunedin, which is, I think, near Tampa. He's now in his third term as a congressman. He went straight from Yale undergraduate, then he went to Harvard Law, and then he went to Judge Advocate General, and he served abroad. He served in Iraq during the war, and he has a beautiful daughter and a beautiful wife. And not only that, but I think that he is going to be the next governor of the great state of Florida. I give you Congressman Ron DeSantis.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Great to be here. What a good event. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Stanley, good to see you. Thanks for coming. Thanks all the friends out there in the audience. Yes, Casey, many of you who do know her, some of you have been able to see our daughter Madison. For those of you who weren't at our event we did in Boca a couple weeks ago, Casey we are expecting another baby, a little boy, which will be great. And life does change with one, and I think with two, it'll be even more. We were actually out to dinner this is actually a while ago, and in the Congress, I think I've told some of you this, when you vote to register your roll call votes, you don't do it by saying yay or nay. You actually get issued a voting card. It's got your picture on it. You put it in a machine. You click yes, no. There's a scoreboard. You're using this thing every day you're in the Congress. Sometimes, you can vote 10, 20 times a day. Well, we were eating dinner, and I keep it in my wallet, and I grabbed what I thought was my credit card to pay the bill. It turned out it was the House of Representatives voting card. And the server came back with it and opened the bill and just looked at the mugshot, looked at me, looked at House of Representatives and said, "Sir, we cannot accept this here. You're $20 trillion in debt." What am I going to do? But, I think it's good to reflect on some of the things that are going on. I think a lot of you have seen what is going on with some of the positive economic news that we're seeing. And as you remember, we had a big debate over tax policy recently in D.C. And people like Nancy Pelosi were telling the American people that their taxes were going to be raised, that people were going to be dying in the street, it was going to be Armageddon, it was the worst bill. Literally, they were saying it was the worst bill in the history of the United States of America. And so that's the ground they staked out. Every single Democrat in both houses voted against it. And the bill has been a law for roughly 2 months. It'll be 2 months tomorrow because the president signed it, I think, on the 22nd of December. Have you ever seen or can you remember a piece of legislation that just being on the books for 2 months has produced so many positive benefits? You have salary increases, you have bonuses. People are getting $1,000, $2,000 bonuses. If you're a rich liberal from San Francisco like Nancy Pelosi, she considers that a crumb. But I think most Americans think that's a breath of fresh air, and it's a godsend to be able to get that, especially when they're trying to make ends meet. You've seen hundreds of billions of dollars earmarked for investment here in the United States. People are bringing cash from overseas and investing here in the United States again. And the thing about it is, all those things are good, but sometimes correlation doesn't mean causation. But in almost every instances, the businesses that are making those decisions are tying their behavior directly to the changes that we produced in the tax bill. And so the Democrats said one thing, they were wrong, we were right. I think you're going to see more benefits out of this, but even if there's no more benefits, it's already been worth doing just for the wage increases, the bonuses, the jobs, and the new investment that we're getting in the United States. And the thing is, it's a simple way to look at the economy. We were disincentivizing people from investing in the United States. We were basically making it easier for people or incentivizing them to go overseas. We had a complicated tax code. We had all these things that were holding the American economy back. We changed those. We changed the incentives. People have changed their behavior, and now we're growing like we haven't in quite some time. I think the same thing works when you look at what you have to do here in Florida, and I think Governor Scott understood this. You can't just do bad policies and think that there's not going to be an effect of how people behave themselves. Now, if you're the governor of Connecticut, you think you can just raise taxes until kingdom come and nothing's going to happen. Well, that experiment has failed. If you look at Illinois and New York and New Jersey, they have a specific liberal model that if they just tax and spend more and more, eventually they will reach the promised land. But what happens is people vote with their feet. Businesses move. And so Governor Scott has done a good job of making Florida a place that is good to do business in. We're trying to attract businesses and jobs. We don't want to chase people away. I think this federal tax bill, because we remove the subsidy for people in high-tax states, effectively remove the subsidy, I think the incentives to come invest here in Florida are as strong as ever. And I think if we can do a couple things over the next 4 to 8 years, I think we can be the #1 destination in the country. One thing you have to do is recognize we have one of the worst litigation climates in the country. When you have too much litigation, that imposes costs on people, imposes costs on businesses, and that is a disincentive for wanting to do business here in Florida. It's something that can be fixed. It's something we should fix. The other thing we can do is focus more on workforce development. A 4-year brick and ivy, our high schools preparing people to go to college, that's good, but a 4-year brick and ivy is not the only way to get advanced knowledge and skills. There is a need to have more technical and vocational training, and not just in terms of the skilled trades, but things in technology and computer science. And if you are doing that, then I think you have a ready-made workforce, and I think they'll be more attractive for businesses to come here and expand here. So we know the lessons of an international economy, doing a federal tax overhaul, leading to good benefits. Governor Scott understood that we're competing with other states. We've done a lot to get ahead of other states. I think we can do more, take advantage of this federal tax bill, and really create a lot of jobs here in Florida, and that's going to be good for everybody. So it's an exciting time to be here. And the president deserves a lot of credit for his leadership on the federal tax bill. Another thing I think, when you talk about the president, I'm the National Security Subcommittee Chairman in the House, and I have oversight over the State Department and particularly some embassies. And so I was very mindful of this president as a candidate making the same promise that other presidential candidates have made but never fulfilled as president, namely recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital and moving our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. So I led the effort in the Congress to tell the president to follow through. I led a trip to Israel last March. We looked at all the different potential embassy locations in Jerusalem, and incidentally, the one that I said was the one, that's the one that David Friedman, the ambassador, is pursuing, and I think we're going to have a ribbon cutting this year, which will be very exciting. And so we did that. The president didn't move it at first or didn't announce. We did a big hearing in November because we knew there was another inflection point. In his great credit, in December of last year, he made an announcement that we would recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And you go back 70 years when Harry Truman made the decision to recognize Israel as a sovereign state. You go around his cabinet and his advisors, oh, don't do it. It's going to cause you problems with the Arabs. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. But Truman said, you know what? Maybe it will cause us some problems with that, but it's the right thing to do. So we will, the United States, recognize this nascent state of Israel, this Jewish state. And I think Donald Trump was in a somewhat similar position, because if you look at his advisors, most of them told him not to do it. Just let sleeping dogs lie, sign a waiver, just keep going. And the president, to his great credit, said, no, I made the promise to the American people, but more importantly, it is the right thing to do to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and so he did it. Here in Florida, I think our mission needs to be the most pro-Israel state in the United States. I think we can do it. I think we've done a lot to do it already. We've done some things, and I think we got to do more in the realm of anti-BDS legislation. If you're boycotting Israel, then there's going to be consequence in terms of doing business in Florida. We're not going to let you wage warfare against the only Jewish state in the world and there not be consequences. The other thing, and Laurie mentioned it, is we cannot have textbooks with anti-Israel bias being taught to our kids. It's wrong. It's not accurate. So we can take action and make Florida be a great place to be and a proud supporter and friend of Israel. But one of the things that the president, I think, has been very concerned with, and many of us have been for a long time, is security here at home. And part of that is to understand the nature of the terrorist threat that we face. Now, when I was in the Navy, I spent some time down in Guantanamo Bay as an officer, not as a detainee, at that detention center. And I can tell you the thing you learn from that is that these guys, have a certain worldview, and it's very simple to them. If you don't submit to their totalitarian ideology, you're an enemy, and they're required to wage war against you. So that is kind of that in a nutshell. Our previous president, Barack Obama, he didn't understand the nature of the threat. I think Donald Trump does. He's working with obviously Israel and other allies, but also Arab allies, Muslim allies who are pro-Western, who recognize Israel, and who recognize the threat posed by militant Islam to their own societies. And so we now have a much stronger coalition with which to fight terrorism. And since Donald Trump has been president and put his strategy into place, the ISIS caliphate has been defeated. And we have more to do to defeat terrorism. The defeat of the caliphate is just one step in that. There's still a threat from ISIS. There's still a threat from Iran. I think we need to designate the Muslim Brotherhood as a foreign terrorist organization. But we're on the right track. The president also has identified the costs that come with not having security of our borders. When you see some of the crimes committed by people in this country illegally, whether it's Kate Steinle or whether it's other examples, you want to be able to prevent any crime from happening in society. But when there are crimes committed by people who should not have been in the country in the first place, well, we can then say to ourselves, had the government simply enforced the law, had the government exercised control over our borders, then some of these horrible crimes would not have been committed in the first place. And so we are trying to work to reestablish the rule of law, yes, to build a border wall, but also do other things like defund sanctuary cities and have mandatory e-verify. If you do that, you're starting to move in the direction of a rule of law and our sovereignty being respected. Of course, security, here in Florida, I think is more important than ever. If you look at what happened in that terrible tragedy in Parkland, I can't help but think to myself, we have let our schools be exposed for too long. You have schools, you have kids, when you're dropping your kids off or they're taking the bus, there shouldn't be a worry for parents that somehow that's not going to be a safe environment. And I think you do need to have security at the schools. I know they had a guy at this school, but you had 3,000 kids, you have a sprawling campus, so these points of entry need to be controlled. I think we can enlist. I think we can enlist retired military, retired police officers who would welcome the opportunity to serve their community and protect our students. And here's the thing. Once you make the schools no longer a soft target, these guys are not going to want to walk in to a situation where they're going to get turned back. The reason that they get drawn to this is because they think it's open season. So yes, it will require some resources, but I think those dollars are well spent, and I think we can harness so many of the people in our community who could do a good job. But you can't look at that situation, the number of times the police were called, the visits. The FBI shown something in Mississippi about what he was posting online. He's using his actual name, and we can't find the guy. And then really one of the lowlights, I think, in modern federal law enforcement, to actually get a call into the FBI hotline where not only is it said this guy has got problems, not only is it said the guy is dangerous, not only is it said he's prone to violence, but that he actually is planning to shoot one of his school. And to not pass that on to the proper people, that is unforgivable. And here's the thing. If you look at all these examples, the Virginia Tech, he was mentally deranged. The thing didn't go into the background check. Charleston, Sutherland Springs, Texas, and now here, bureaucratic ineptitude. I don't care what laws you have. If they can't enforce the laws and do their job, then they're putting our community at risk. So somebody needs to be held accountable for this. Speaking of the FBI, and yeah, this is only a handful of these guys, but I think what you've seen over the last 6 months in Washington is really exposing, a dark underbelly of how people like Jim Comey and McCabe and Peter Strzok conducted themselves when they were in very sensitive positions of power. And 6 or 7 months ago, nobody knew, none of the public knew, that this dossier, this phony dossier, was actually paid for by the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee. The FBI, Comey knew, Strzok knew, Bruce Orr definitely knew because his wife was working for Fusion GPS. So you have this confluence between the Clinton campaign, the upper echelons of the Comey FBI, and the Department of Justice under Loretta Lynch and Barack Obama working to eventually obtain surveillance over somebody affiliated with Donald Trump, the opposing candidate's campaign. And that was not right the way they did it. And you look at what's happened since we've really started to dig into Congress. Peter Strzok, he was texting his lover, Lisa Page, that the FBI, we can't take the risk of a Trump presidency, and we need an insurance policy to prevent it. That's what he was saying. That's not just bias, that's showing his actions, and that's the problem. Peter Strzok demoted, Lisa Page demoted, Bruce Orr demoted, Rybicki, Comey's chief of staff, out of the government, McCabe out of the government, or out of the government very soon, James Baker reassigned, who was Comey's general counsel. I think some of these guys need to be fired, but at least we're starting to identify who some of the problems were. And the thing is if you look at all this stuff, when the media loves to conflate it, they'll say, Russia did this, therefore Trump colluded with Russia. There's been no evidence of collusion, guys. None. For this whole time, the collusion evidence is based off that dossier. So here we are, a year and a half later. They do this indictment and says no witting connection with any American, much less the Trump campaign. So, my view is do whatever you can to hold Russia accountable. I mean, I was actually against Russia long before the Democrats gave a damn about Russia, which they didn't used to do at all. But don't act like this is somehow a conspiracy involving Trump's campaign. And I think Mueller, if he doesn't have evidence of that, he needs to say that, and we need to move on so that we can focus on the American people's business. And some of the stuff that's we see out there, and Trump really has prevented this from being a total disaster, but we have a real problem with activist courts. You look at a judge, may not like Trump, so they do this or that or all these other things. Their job is to apply the law and Constitution as it is actually written. They don't have authority to rewrite the law and Constitution as they would want it to be. When they engage in judicial activism, that perverts the Constitution, and it saps our ability as citizens to govern ourselves through our elected officials. Had Hillary won the presidential election, she would have been able to fill the seat of Justice Antonin Scalia, the great justice, with a liberal jurist. That would have been 5 liberal jurists out of 9, a working majority, and that court would have been a runaway court. They would be rewriting the law and Constitution as we sit here today. So by Donald Trump winning and putting Neil Gorsuch on the court, that really saved us from probably an unprecedented era of judicial activism. And Gorsuch has been a great selection. I hope Donald Trump can replace Anthony Kennedy and Ruth Bader Ginsburg after this term ends. Would be really good. But he's also done a lot of judges on the Court of Appeals, one step below the Supreme Court. Obama did, it was bad for our lights, but Obama stacked the Court of Appeals. He flipped a lot of Court of Appeals that had long been constitutionalist in nature. He flipped them to be more liberal in nature, and so Trump is trying to correct that and restore a semblance of the rule of law. in Florida, we've known judicial activism for a long time with our state courts. I mean, our state Supreme Court has been very liberal for a very long time. They get involved in things that are more political rather than legal. And this next election is an inflection point for that court because we have 3 of the 4 remaining liberal jurists are facing mandatory retirement age at the end of Rick Scott's term. So we have an opportunity to put state Supreme Court justices on the bench who understand the proper role of the court, who aren't going to try to go outside and shed their judicial role and become a super legislature. That ultimately will give Floridians more freedom to govern themselves. I think it'll let us enact more significant conservative reforms than previous administrations have been able to do. And that in and of itself, just as the 2016 election, for no other reason, the court was enough of a reason that we needed to win it. I think the same thing is true in 2018 here in Florida. We got to win it, we got to fix the court, and we got to restore the rule of law for our state. You know, I've been proud in the Congress to join with people like President Trump and others to oppose federal intervention in our local schools, like things like Common Core. That have not been good for students and have not worked. And I think we need to look at how we do education here in Florida. I mentioned part of what education should be is preparing people to have some tangible skills. Not everyone needs to go to college, and it's honorable to do professions that don't require college. So preparing people for either higher education or the workforce is important, but we also have to recognize that we're preparing people for citizenship. You know, you graduate high school, you're either 18 or you're going to turn 18, you're going to register to vote, you're going to be part of the American body politic. And I think that we have to recognize that we have not done a good job of teaching the basics of what it means to be an American. I think you need to get the Constitution back in the classroom and be taught not just on a day or for 2 days or a week, but really take a whole semester or a whole year to understand the principles that animated the American Revolution, that are reflected in our Constitution and Bill of Rights. There's a reason why America has been a successful country. Yes, we have a lot of great people, but you know, a lot of the people who came here, they were rejected in the societies that they came from. They didn't necessarily come from the right stuff, but they were able to come to a society based on this idea of having certain inalienable God-given rights, and many people have flourished. The reason why you flourish is because of those principles and ideas that make us unique as a people. So when you're graduating students, I hope they get ready for college, or I hope they're ready for the workforce, but man, they need to be ready for citizenship, and that means understanding what makes America special. You know, Donald Trump came to Washington and said that he was going to drain the swamp. And if you look, I think he only got 5% of the vote inside the District of Columbia. That's actually, to me, like if I knew nothing else about any of the candidates, if you said one candidate got 95% in D.C., the other got 5, I'd be like, I'm with the one who got 5. There's a reason why they don't like him there. And so I've been working to try to drain the swamp. I mean, you know, I do things like I got into Congress, I declined the congressional pension because I don't think we need elected officials to have pensions, particularly congressmen who make a lot of money. A lot of them are lobbyists afterwards. So I thought it was important to lead by example on that. And I've also worked to eliminate pensions for members of Congress legislatively, which I think we need to do. I took one of Trump's speeches that he gave where he was talking about draining the swamp, and I just wrote down kind of what his proposals were, and I turned it into a piece of legislation called the Drain the Swamp Act. Now, it's not very popular with the Republican or Democratic leadership, but it would do things like impose a 5-year moratorium before a member of Congress or a congressional staffer can work on K Street as a lobbyist, basically trying to end the revolving door that's really perverted our system. And also in that speech was something that I was glad he endorsed, because I've been a supporter a long time, is term limits for members of Congress, which we need very much. And so one of the things when I looked at, okay, I'm fighting to do that in Washington, there's a lot of resistance, doesn't mean you quit. But I think one of the effective ways to drain the swamp is to actually do it through our states. Florida has certified both term limits and a balanced budget amendment through Article 5 of the Constitution. The founders put it there because they knew you needed to go around Congress at some point. And so I'll be a guy who I'll be working with other states to try to move that ball forward. And if Congress sees that there's steam gaining behind some of these proposals, they're going to have to get into gear, and they probably will end up doing something. So you can drain the swamp in Washington by being here in Florida and working with other states, just as the Founding Fathers intended. And that's something that really excites me. So I think 2018 is an important election year. We're in a big fight. I mean, I think Donald Trump's election so shocked a lot of our friends in the Democratic Party, a lot of the media who thought there was no way. I mean, the media has never gotten over it. I mean, they've just been after him for every day, nonstop. You know, you have some of the folks on the other side of the aisle from me, you know, they've really had a tough time adjusting. They got folks that are energized and they want to go and send a message to the president because they're upset that he's following through on his word. So we have to be, you know, folks who are out there fighting for what we believe in. And I like to, you know, figure out, okay, what are we fighting for? What's the issue? You know, we're fighting for, yes, we're fighting for good tax policy. Yes, we're fighting for things like welfare reform and things like that. But we're also fighting for, you know, what does it mean to be an American? Alexander Hamilton, when they wrote the Constitution and he started writing the Federalist Papers, he said, it's fallen to us here in America to determine whether people really can govern themselves through reflection and choice, or whether we're forever destined to live under various forms of despotism. This country here was the one that was ultimately going to determine the fate of humankind. And the reason why they thought that is because they were very astute, the founders. They studied the history of every republic and democracy and the history of mankind, and they noticed that all of those experiments had one common theme that linked all of them together, and it was this: every one of them had failed. And so, could you finally succeed in a free society that's based on a government protecting our God-given rights, providing its citizens what Abraham Lincoln said was an open field and fair chance for your industry, enterprise, and intelligence to flourish, or was this thing just going to run aground and we'll be back to square one with other failed societies? And this was something that they had to answer at that time with a constitution, a revolution. But as Reagan said, freedom isn't hereditary. It's not passed along in the bloodstream. You got to fight for it every year, every day, every election cycle. And so that's really what we're doing. We're still defining what does it mean to be an American, what is the nature of a free society, and I think we are the ones standing behind those core principles that make us unique as a country. And so it's an honor for me to be here at this great event. God bless you all, and thank you so much.